Captain Scifi stared at the scanner readout and let out a long, suffering sigh that seemed to echo through his entire four-armed frame. In his 50 years of salvage work across the Outer Rim, he had developed a simple philosophy. If it wasn't shiny, valuable, or dead, it wasn't worth the fuel to investigate. The blinking dot on his screen appeared to be none of those things. "Captain, we've got a debris field at coordinate 7 Mark IV, chirped Pip, his Andromedian engineer, her crystalline features practically glowing with excitement. Everything excited Pip. Yesterday she had gotten excited about a particularly interesting piece of space junk that turned out to be someone's discarded lunch container. "Debris fields don't pay the bills, Pip," Scifi muttered, scratching behind one of his horn-like sensory ridges. "Unless there's something worth salvaging, we're not stopping." "Actually, sir," interrupted Gorks from the weapons station, his perpetually gloomy voice somehow managing to sound even more depressed than usual, "there's a life pod in that mess, still transmitting a distress beacon." "Oh, wonderful," Scifi said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Let me guess. It's probably some traitor who got himself blown up trying to smuggle contraband through pirate space. Now I'll have to do paperwork." "Scans indicate the pod is of human design," announced Beep, the ship's navigation AI, in a tone that somehow managed to be both mechanical and condescending. "How delightfully primitive." Scifi paused. Humans. He had heard of them, of course. Some backwater species from a little blue planet called Earth, somewhere in the unfashionable end of the galaxy. They had only recently made contact with the Galactic Council, and most civilized species considered them barely above the level of clever pets. Still, technically they were a recognized sapient species, which meant there were laws about leaving them to die in space. "Life signs?" he asked reluctantly. "One human, unconscious but stable," Pip reported, practically bouncing in her seat. "Oh, can we rescue him? Please. I've never seen a real human before." "They're supposed to be quite entertaining," Beep added. "Like watching a newly sentient species try to figure out basic technology. Very amusing." Gorks just shook his massive gray head. "This is going to end badly. Mark my words, Captain. Nothing good ever comes from rescuing random aliens." But Scifi considered his options. On one hand, there would indeed be paperwork. Mountains of it. The Galactic Council loved their bureaucracy almost as much as they loved looking down on lesser species. On the other hand, there might be a small reward for the rescue, and his ship's fuel reserves were running lower than he'd like to admit. "Fine," he said finally. "Bring the pod aboard. But I'm charging the Council for fuel, time, and emotional distress." 20 minutes later, they had hauled the battered escape pod into their cargo bay. The thing was a mess, scorched black and pockmarked with what looked like weapons fire. Whatever had happened to this human ship, it hadn't been an accident. "Pod's atmosphere is stable," Pip announced as they gathered around the sealed hatch. "He should wake up soon." "Wonderful," Scifi said dryly. "I can hardly wait to explain galactic law to a primitive who probably thinks faster than light travel is magic." The escape pod hatch hissed open with a sound like a dying air recycler, and out tumbled the most unremarkable creature Scifi had ever seen. The human was average height, covered in what appeared to be some kind of blue fabric uniform, with brown fur on the top of his head and small, round eyes that blinked owlishly as he took in his surroundings. "Well," the human said, stretching and looking around the cargo bay with casual interest, "this is new. Thanks for the pickup, folks." Scifi blinked all 4 of his eyes in sequence. In his experience, rescued beings usually went through a predictable pattern: confusion, fear, gratitude, then annoying questions about when they could go home. This human seemed to have skipped straight to casual conversation. "You are aboard the salvage vessel Profit Margin," Scifi said formally. "I am Captain Scifi of the Zelthian Republic. You have been rescued under Galactic Maritime Law Section." "Jake Murphy," the human interrupted cheerfully, extending his hand. When no one moved to take it, he shrugged and let it drop. Cargo hauler out of Earth. Well, I was until my ship got turned into confetti by some pirates near the Kepler drift. Pirates, Gork said glumly. I told you this would end badly. Actually, Jake continued, apparently oblivious to the weapons officer's pessimism, it could have ended a lot worse. Those guys had some serious firepower. Really put the bust in space bust, if you know what I mean. He grinned at his own joke. The silence that followed was so complete that Zef could hear the ship's life support systems humming. That, Beep announced, was possibly the worst attempt at humor I have ever processed. And my memory banks include 17 different species comedy databases. Tough crowd, Jake said, still grinning. So, what's the plan? I assume you've already contacted someone about picking me up. Zef rubbed his sensory ridges again. I will be filing a rescue report with the Galactic Council. They will determine the appropriate procedure for repatriating you to your home world. Earth, Jake said helpfully. Third planet from a yellow star in what you folks probably call the Sol system. Nice place if you like oxygen and gravity. Pip leaned forward eagerly. Is it true that humans still use chemical combustion for transportation? Some of us, Jake admitted. Though we've got some pretty decent spacefaring technology too. I mean, I did make it all the way out here before getting blown up. Barely functional faster-than-light capability, Beep said dismissively. Your species achieved interstellar flight less than a century ago. Most civilized races consider Earth to be a quaint curiosity at best. Jake's expression didn't change. Well, we're still pretty new to the neighborhood. But hey, everyone's got to start somewhere, right? Zef found himself slightly impressed, despite himself. Most species became defensive when their technological limitations were pointed out. This human just acknowledged it and moved on. It was almost refreshingly honest. The Council will likely arrange transport for you within a few standard cycles, Zef explained. In the meantime, you are welcome to use our guest quarters, such as they are. Much appreciated, Jake said. Fair warning though, I should probably get home soon. My daughter's birthday is coming up, and if I miss it, my wife will turn me into the kind of space debris that doesn't send distress signals. He said it with such casual warmth that even Gork's perpetual scowl softened slightly. Family is important, Pip said earnestly. Yeah, Jake agreed, his easy smile faltering just a bit. They worry when I'm late. 3 sectors away, in the gleaming crystal spires of Galactic Council headquarters, Minister Vexthul reviewed the day's reports with the enthusiasm of someone watching paint dry on a particularly boring wall. As a mid-level bureaucrat in the Department of Minor Species Affairs, his job consisted primarily of processing paperwork that no one important would ever read. The rescue report from Captain Zef barely rated a second glance. Humans, honestly. The Council had only admitted Earth to the galactic community as a courtesy, mostly because they had achieved faster-than-light travel, and it would have been embarrassing to ignore them completely. But everyone knew they were barely above the level of an interesting anthropological curiosity. Another human rescue, he announced to his assistant, a nervous Fresnelian named Quek, who jumped at shadows and apologized for breathing too loudly. Apparently one of their cargo haulers ran into pirates. Should we contact their government? Quek asked, wringing all 6 of his hands. Vexthul waved a dismissive tentacle. I suppose we should send them a courtesy notification. Can't have them claiming we don't follow proper diplomatic protocols. He pulled up Earth's file on his terminal and shook his head at the pathetic statistics. A single world, barely 4 billion sentient beings, no significant military presence beyond their own system, and technology that most first-year academy students would find quaint. They had exactly 1 representative on the council, and he spent most of his time looking confused during sessions. Draft a message, Vexthul instructed. something appropriately parental. Let them know we have their missing citizen and that we're taking good care of him. 20 minutes later, he was reviewing Quek's draft with growing amusement. Perfect. This strikes exactly the right tone. Reassuring but not overly concerned. We wouldn't want them to think this sort of thing is important. The message read, "To the governing bodies of Earth. We are pleased to inform you that one of your citizens has been safely recovered after a minor incident in space. Jake Murphy is currently in protective custody and will be returned to your system once proper procedures have been completed. Please do not be alarmed. As this is a routine matter, we understand that as a developing civilization, you may have concerns, but rest assured that more experienced species are handling the situation." "Send it," Vexthal said with satisfaction, "and schedule the human for processing at Station Omega-7. Nothing too elaborate, just the standard decontamination and documentation procedures." "What about transport back to Earth?" Quek asked. "Oh, put him on the next available cargo transport heading in that direction. No need to waste resources on a dedicated vessel for one primitive." Meanwhile, aboard the Profit Margin, Jake Murphy was entertaining Pip with stories about Earth while Zefkar tried to ignore the growing sense that this routine rescue was about to become significantly less routine. "So you're telling me your species actually keeps other animals as companions?" Pip asked, fascinated. "Dogs, cats, birds, fish," Jake confirmed. "My daughter has a cat named Professor Whiskers. He's got a PhD in knocking things off tables." Even Beep seemed intrigued. "And these pets serve no functional purpose." "They make us happy," Jake said simply. "Sometimes that's enough." Zefkar paused in his maintenance work. In all his years dealing with various species, he had rarely heard anyone suggest that happiness alone was sufficient justification for anything. "Sounds inefficient," Gorks muttered, but there was less conviction in his voice than usual. "Maybe," Jake agreed, "but Earth's got room for inefficiency. We're not exactly struggling for resources these days." That caught Zefkar's attention. "Your planet is resource-rich?" "Rich enough," Jake said with a shrug. "We've got more than we need anyway." Minister Vex Thul was enjoying his morning stimulant when his terminal exploded into activity. Not literally exploded, though given the volume of incoming priority alerts, he almost wished it had. "Minister." Quek burst through the door, all 6 arms flailing in panic. "We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" Vexthal asked, though the sinking feeling in his digestive tract suggested he already knew it wasn't going to be the good kind. "The humans," Quek squeaked. They've responded to our message about their missing citizen." "Wonderful. Let me guess, they're sending a strongly worded thank you note." "Not exactly, sir. They've positioned fleets at 17 of our major system borders." Vexthal's morning stimulant suddenly tasted like liquid fear. "Fleets? What kind of fleets?" "Big ones, sir. According to our border stations, each fleet consists of approximately 200 vessels, ranging from escort frigates to what our analysts are calling uncomfortably large dreadnoughts." The terminal chimed with an incoming priority communication. The holographic display materialized to show a human female in what was clearly a military uniform. She had steel gray hair, cold blue eyes, and an expression that could have frozen plasma. "I am Admiral Rebecca Stone of the Earth Defense Force," she said without preamble. "I understand you have one of our citizens." Vexthal tried to project calm authority while his internal organs rearranged themselves in terror. "Admiral Stone, I assure you this is a routine matter. Your citizen is perfectly safe and—" "I wasn't asking about his condition," Stone interrupted, her voice carrying the temperature of deep space. "I was informing you that we will be collecting him. Immediately." "Me?" Of course. But surely there's no need for such an extensive military presence. We are perfectly capable of." "Minister Vex Thul," Stone said, And the fact that she knew his name made his blood pressure spike. 3 days ago, one of our people sent out a distress call. It took you 12 hours to respond to our initial request for information. In that time, we have received exactly one message from your government, which treated the kidnapping of our citizen as a minor clerical matter. Kidnapping? Vexthul sputtered. That's hardly. You will deliver Jake Murphy to the following coordinates within 6 hours, Stone continued as if he hadn't spoken. You will also provide a full accounting of the circumstances that led to his ship's destruction, including the identities of the parties responsible. Any deviation from these instructions will be interpreted as an act of aggression against Earth. The communication ended, leaving Vexthul staring at a blank screen while Quek made small whimpering sounds in the corner. Sir? Quek ventured. What do we do? Vexthul was already pulling up Earth's file again, scrolling frantically through data that suddenly seemed woefully inadequate. 4 billion citizens, he had noted dismissively just days ago. What he had apparently failed to consider was that 4 billion of any species represented a significant potential military force. Get me the Defense Ministry, he said, his voice cracking slightly, and find out everything we can about these humans. Apparently, we may have made a slight miscalculation. Within the hour, reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. Human fleets had appeared seemingly from nowhere, taking positions at every major hyperspace junction between Earth and Council space. They weren't attacking, weren't even powered up for combat, but their mere presence was sending shockwaves through the galactic community. How many ships do they have? Demanded Defense Minister Krexnal, his scaled features flushed with what might have been embarrassment or rage. Current estimates suggest over 3,000 vessels, reported Admiral Zeltok, the Council's military commander. All of apparently recent construction and significantly more advanced than our initial intelligence suggested. 3,000? Vexthul felt faint, but their file says they barely have any military presence. Their file, Zeltok said grimly, appears to be somewhat outdated. Aboard the profit margin, Zefkar was having the worst day of his career, and that included the time he had accidentally salvaged a Grontharian battlecruiser with its crew still aboard. Captain Gorks announced in his usual doom-laden tone, "We are surrounded." Through the view screen, Zefkar could see them, sleek human vessels arranged in a perfect sphere around his tiny salvage ship. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, their hulls gleaming white with blue markings, and absolutely bristling with weapons systems that looked far too advanced for a primitive species. Well, Jake said mildly, looking out at the fleet, looks like the cavalry's arrived. Cavalry? Pip squeaked. It's an Earth expression, Jake explained. Means the good guys showed up just in time. Beep's mechanical voice carried a note of accusation. You seem remarkably calm for someone whose rescue has apparently triggered a galactic crisis. Jake turned to look at the AI's optical sensors. Should I not be? An incoming communication request chimed on the bridge console. Zefkar accepted it with trembling hands, and the holographic display showed the same steel-eyed human admiral who had terrorized Minister Vexthul. Captain Zefkar, Admiral Stone said, her voice slightly less arctic than before. I understand we owe you a debt of gratitude for rescuing our citizen. It was nothing, Zefkar stammered. Standard maritime law, you understand. Nevertheless, we appreciate your actions. Stone's gaze shifted to Jake. Director Murphy, are you well? Director? Zefkar felt another piece of the puzzle click into place with an almost audible snap. I'm fine, Admiral, Jake said, suddenly sounding less like a casual cargo hauler and more like someone accustomed to authority. Captain Zefkar and his crew have taken excellent care of me. I'm pleased to hear it. Stone's attention returned to Zefkar. Captain, you should know that Director Murphy serves as Earth's special liaison for Outer Rim affairs. His mission to the Kepler drift was diplomatic in nature. Zefkar closed all 4 eyes and counted to 10 in 3 different languages. When he opened them again, Jake was wearing an apologetic expression. "Sorry about the deception," Jake said. "But when you're conducting sensitive negotiations with alien governments, it's sometimes better if pirates think you're just a cargo hauler instead of a diplomatic envoy." "The pirates who destroyed your ship," Stone said, her voice dropping back toward absolute zero, "have been located and are no longer a concern." "What does that mean exactly?" Gorks asked. Stone's smile was sharp enough to cut through armor plating. "It means they discovered why it's a bad idea to attack Earth citizens." Pip looked confused. "But I thought your species was peaceful?" "We are," Jake said gently. "Right up until someone threatens our family. Then we get a little protective." "A little?" Zefkar stared out at the massive fleet surrounding them. "This is your idea of a little protective." "You should see what we do when we're really angry," Jake said with that same easy smile, though now it carried undertones that made Zefkar's sensory ridges itch. Admiral Stone stepped forward in the hologram. "Captain, Earth would like to formally thank you and your crew for your actions. Director Murphy has spoken highly of your character and integrity. We're also prepared to offer compensation for your trouble," Jake added. "And before you ask, yes, it will be enough to cover the fuel costs, time, and emotional distress." Despite everything, Zefkar found himself almost smiling. Almost. "Where?" "There is one thing I don't understand," he said. "Your government mobilized this entire fleet for one person? Even a diplomat?" Stone and Jake exchanged a look that seemed to carry an entire conversation. "Captain," Stone said finally, "let me ask you something. If someone took one of your crew members, how would you respond?" Zefkar glanced at Pip, who was practically vibrating with excitement at being included in a diplomatic incident, at Gorks, who was grumbling about how he had predicted this would end badly, and at Beep, who was probably calculating the statistical probability of their survival. "I would get them back," he said quietly. "Now imagine that feeling," Jake said, "but instead of a crew of 4, you're talking about 4 billion people who all consider each other family." 3 months later, Zefkar sat in his favorite bar on Nexus Station, nursing a drink and trying to make sense of how dramatically his life had changed. The profit margin was docked in Berth 7, her hull gleaming with new modifications courtesy of Earth's compensation package. His crew was scattered around the station, spending their substantial bonus payments with the enthusiasm of people who had never expected to be rich. "Captain." Pip's crystalline features were practically glowing as she bounded over to his table. "The new sensor array is incredible. We can detect salvage from 3 times the distance now. And the new engines," Gorks added, though his tone remained professionally pessimistic, "are probably too advanced for us to maintain properly. Mark my words, we'll be stranded somewhere inconvenient within a year." The statistical probability of mechanical failure has actually decreased by 67.4%. Beep's voice emanated from Pip's communicator. "Though I admit that expressing optimism feels somehow wrong." Zefkar chuckled. Even his ship's AI was having an existential crisis about humanity's impact on their lives. The holographic display above the bar was showing the latest galactic news, and as had become routine, humans featured prominently. Earth had leveraged their spectacular entrance onto the galactic stage into full membership in the Galactic Council, with voting rights and everything. They had also established trade relationships with dozens of species and were apparently in the process of building what the news anchors were calling the most advanced deep space exploration fleet in galactic history. "Still can't believe they did all that for one person," Pip mused. "It wasn't about one person," Zefkar said, repeating something Jake had told him during their final conversation. "It was about the principle. Humans protect their own, no matter what." His communicator chimed with an incoming message. The sender was listed simply as Jake Murphy, Earth. "Captain Zefkar." The message began, "I hope this finds you well. Rebecca told me about your new ship upgrades, and I'm glad to hear they're working out. I wanted to let you know that the diplomatic mission you accidentally rescued me from was a complete success. The Kepler drift colonies have joined the Earth Alliance, which means safer shipping lanes for everyone in that sector. I also wanted to thank you again for taking a chance on helping a stranger. My daughter loved the Andromedian crystal sculpture Pip sent for her birthday, by the way. She says it's going to be the centerpiece of her rock collection. One more thing, Earth is establishing a new deep space rescue service, and we're looking for experienced captains who understand the value of helping people in distress. The pay is excellent, the benefits are comprehensive, and you'd be doing exactly what you did for me. But on a larger scale. If you're interested, give me a call. Your friend, Jake. Attached to the message was a small package notification. When Zefkar opened it, he found a bottle of something called Earth whiskey and a handwritten note for starting the conversation. Zefkar stared at the bottle for a long moment, then at the rescue service offer, then out the view screen at the stars beyond. In his 50 years of salvage work, he had learned that the most valuable things in the universe were usually the ones you couldn't put a price on. Pip, he said finally, how do you feel about a career change? Will there be more humans involved? She asked eagerly. Probably. Then I'm in. Even Gork seemed intrigued. The benefits package is comprehensive, you said. And we'd be helping people, Zefkar added. People who might have families waiting for them to come home. He opened the bottle Jake had sent and poured himself a small glass. The whiskey burned in the best possible way, warm and complex and somehow tasting like hope. Outside the view screen, a human patrol ship glided past the station, its hull bearing the blue and white insignia of the Earth Defense Force. Just 3 months ago, no one in the galaxy had taken humanity seriously. Now their ships patrolled the trade routes, their diplomats sat on the council, and their rescue services were becoming legendary for their efficiency and dedication. All because one salvage captain had decided to do the right thing. Zefkar raised his glass in a silent toast to Jake Murphy, to second chances, and to the strange ways the universe sometimes worked. Then he activated his communicator and began composing his reply. After all, someone had to keep an eye on these humans, and if his experience was any indication, it was going to be the most interesting job in the galaxy.